In what has been possibly my favourite curveball of Gran Turismo 7 so far, this vehicle was not previously leaked, and I'm so glad that it wasn't actually, because it's a fantastic surprise. I know a ton of people don't care for electric cars, but I have a feeling that even non-electric car fans can sometimes make exceptions. Stuff like the Porsche Taycan, the Rimac, they're kind of electric cars that go so far above and beyond that it's kind of undeniable how badass they are. Now, interestingly, the Volkswagen ID.R, which of course dominated the Goodwood Hill climb, dominated the Nurburgring, and dominated Pikes Peak, is a vehicle which in some ways has slightly underwhelming specs. See, the top speed on this one is only around the 175 mile an hour region, so on paper there are literally tons of cars in the game which can wipe the floor with it in a straight line, at least top end. But the acceleration is so rapid and it's so quick through corners that on any circuit with a technical approach, for example a Nordschleife, well, it's just a car that is a force to be reckoned with, and it's a force to be reckoned with without even touching the tuning, and that's always a great sign. Now, in terms of power, it's actually a little bit modest by electric standards. It's only got 670, which these days doesn't sound like anything at all. Usually you're expecting 1500, 2000, Lotus Evija type of stuff. This one's much more modest. The payoff is, it's also modest on weight. It weighs barely over a ton at 1,030 kilos, and for an electric car, especially by current standards, that really is the standout thing about the vehicle. To be that light, of course due to the battery pack being limited, is a big deal. Now the downside to that is of course long distance range. In fact, if I recall correctly, I believe that was one of the main challenges they had to overcome when approaching the Nürburgring record. The battery's lasting long enough to do so. Now, in the game, it's not as much of an issue, unless of course you're in an event, and that is where the problems arise when it comes to using this car. Now, much like the Suuzki Escudo, I do feel like this is one of those cars that you can kind of justify buying regardless of if you plan to use it in career mode, just because it's such a cool car. But if you do plan to use them in career mode, something like an Escudo is more useful. I will say that, because although the point level is extremely high, you could feasibly lower it enough to maybe use it in career, certainly use it online. Whereas with the Volkswagen, the fact that battery packs, at least last time I checked, do not get replenished in the pit lane, it's kind of a big deal. If you're in a race that doesn't need it, then sure, if you're in any kind of endurance event or have fuel consumption on, you're screwed, simply put. Now with that in mind, what can the car do in practice? Well, here at the Nordschleife, as I touched on in my review of the entire update, it was ballistic. Even my outlap was just over 6 minutes, and that was very modest. I certainly wasn't keeping up an extreme pace by any stretch. I was getting used to the car, and speaking to that point, this is a vehicle which, if you do decide to buy it for the 2 million credit price tag from, of course, the main Volkswagen dealership, it's not a legendary car, if you do decide to go for it, give the car 2 or 3 minutes, sometimes even 2 or 3 laps, depending on the circuit, to really decide if you like it or not. Because initially, even I, who love the car, and certainly love it now, I was initially a little bit apprehensive. Because, again, as I talked about in that video yesterday, if you floor this thing out of a corner, and especially if you're still in the corner, the rampant understeer feels almost like you're driving a Ford Focus RS with 300 horsepower going through the front wheels, and it just pulls you straight out, toward the wall. If, on the other hand, you learn that throttle control, which really doesn't take long, to be honest, you will be flying around laps and probably breaking most of your own records on a number of circuits. The instant torque delivery, the completely unbroken acceleration, well, as you can tell, I'm definitely a shill for electric vehicles, and I will never apologise for it because I think it's awesome. In fact, I'm not so much an electric car fan, I'm just a fan of cool technology in general, and to me, what cars like this can do, even with the limitations of today's technology, just speak for themselves. Now, within the game, the point level is quite high, as you would safely assume, 867, just under 868 stock. Interestingly, there is actually one thing that you can do to it visually, which is add kind of ground effects style side skirts in the GT Auto shop, which is kind of cool. No real difference in point level, but still a cool visual change. It's a fantastic base to work with for liveries, partly because it doesn't have headlights, so kind of like a NASCAR, you can paint the front end pretty much exactly how you want it to look. In my case, of course, at the start of this video, I'll have probably put in the shout out to the Team HSG livery, for example, which I made for this car. It's the first Team HSG colours that I've done in quite some time, and it's a great base for stuff like that because it looks so good. It's obvious from what I've been saying, it is a force to be reckoned with on the track, and if you just give it that few extra minutes to really get used to that throttle control, it's actually surprisingly pleasant, to be honest, how quickly it goes from being concerningly heavy under throttle to then you'll just notice, oh, I'm actually just driving it normally now. You learn this car so quickly, and it is so rewarding to work with, because let's be honest, and I've talked about this before, there are some cars that are challenging to drive, and that's kind of just where it ends. They're just bad. They're just not that great without tuning especially, and they're not that rewarding even when you do get them right. Then there are other cars which are known for being challenging, which are worth the effort. Ultimately, electric isn't for everyone, and some people are jaded by the game at this point, and I don't blame you at all. I will say though, this is something which I'm really happy to see in Gran Turismo, in this game, and potentially moving forward, and I'm glad that it's here. But that's it for this review. Of course, stick around over this weekend for me to review the other two cars as well, and until next time I'll see you then. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.